here to this session. We originally had a speaker set up for today, but it was unable to show up. And we need to give a round of applause for Mr. Peter Terry coming in and having this beautiful talk with us today in lieu of our original plans. There's a joke they say, when you make God, oh my gosh. Okay, when you make plans, there's a joke, and I just ruined it, but I'm gonna tell it to you anyway. So if you want to tell God a joke, tell him your plans. That was the joke until I ruined it. So don't give it away like I did. Tell your friends and see if they laugh. So I just want to introduce Peter Terry in the topic, and we'll get straight to it. So Peter Terry is a gentleman that has been working with Clearwater and Clearwater Baha'is initiative for some time. He is currently teaching a course on the Kitab-i-Iqan, a home study, amazing course. You should all look at it. And if you want to start from the beginning, we have recordings on YouTube, on Facebook. Please go look at them. It is well worth your time. But before that, he started a course on the Bayan, which is the holy book of the Babi dispensation, the Persian Bayan that the Bab, the founder of the Babi faith, wrote. It's extremely, extremely, extremely important that you're aware of this. If you were not aware, please check it out. It's very beautiful. I know I'm not giving the typical intro for Mr. Peter Terry because he's done so many things on our initiative. I will give, though, another snippet as to who he is outside of his service that he's been already performing that you can take part in. Mr. Peter Terry holds a BA in International Education, grades K through 8 from the University of Massachusetts, and a master's degree in vocal performance from the San Francisco Conservatory of Music. And let me tell you, if you want to listen to that online, check it out. Peter Terry on YouTube, he sings wonderfully. Further, he also started a PhD program at the University of Chicago and a Bachelor of Music program at Oberlin College. His areas of specialized knowledge include pedagogical theory and practice, Western classical music, Jewish, Christian, Islamic, Babi, and Baha'i history, and scripture. He's published several books. I'm only going to be mentioning one or two of them, but we have a whole list of them on clearwaterbaha'is.org. You can see his bio and the amazing books he has written. I'm going to highlight two of them. Tahireh in History, Perspectives on Ghudratul Ain from East and West, Studies in the Babi and Baha'i Religions, Volume 16. It is edited by Sabir Afaqi and John Teofil Gession. I'm sorry if I'm saying his name incorrect. There is also another one I'd like to get everyone in on. There's a Baha'i Epistemology commentary. It's in Studies in Baha'i Epistemology, Volume 3. Also, I'll just throw in a third. He's also published something for the Global Faith book series, Lights of Irfan. Lights of Irfan, if you haven't heard of it, it's an amazing book series. A lot of scholarly information in there. Perhaps Peter, before he starts, will elaborate what Irfan means. It's a very, very important, beautiful word, which is and correct me too on that, it's originally Arabic, but Farsi, they use the term. I would like to just say the topic for today, we have the two parts of the religion of God. That is the topic, the two parts of the religion of God. In the process of reading a wide range of talks and tablets by Abdu'l-Bahá, along with some of the writings of Baha'u'lláh and letters of the Guardian, certain themes related to the progressive revelation of the religion of God appeared consistently and with such clarity and convincing logic that the present compiler felt compelled to draw up a series of compilations descriptive of each of these themes. Hopefully, this study will be correlated with the original texts in Persian and Arabic and with parallel texts found in the Tanakh, the New Testament, the Qur'an, the Bayan, and the scriptures of the Hindu, Buddhist, Sikh, Jain, and other Asiatic religions. Any depiction of the perennial and dispensational teachings of religion must ultimately include all of these texts. You can find this on Baha'i-library.com/Terry_parts_la_God. So it's Baha'i-library.com/Terry, as in TERRY_parts PARTS_law LAW_God GOD. With that being said, Peter, welcome. We're so happy to have you, and we're all ready. Please take it away. Oh, I can't hear you. If you could, Peter, turn your audio on, unmute.
I am
There we go. We can hear you.
I am now unmuted.
Yes, you are.
So wonderful. Thank you, John. This is a mostly unexpected pleasure because we didn't know that this cancellation for sure was not going to happen until mere moments ago. But I'm very glad that to have this opportunity to talk with you about some pretty important things and important themes that are in some cases not that well known amongst Baha'is, let alone the rest of the world. So before I go right into this theme of the two parts of the law of God, I want to bring to your attention, or bring back to your attention, the fact that the manifestations of God, which if you're familiar with Baha'i terminology, means the prophets, the messengers, or even in some of the Eastern traditions, they're called the Buddhas, they're called the Tathagata, they're called also the avatars. So there are many terms that denote who these characters are, and they are intermediaries between the unseen, unknowable God in his essence and human beings. We're very, very fortunate that we actually have a messenger who comes to us from time to time in history and speaks to us at our level so that we can come to understand what we're in for when we leave this plane of existence. And it's a very glorious theme. So I wanted to first bring to your attention one of the teachings of Baha'u'lláh that's found in the Kitab-i-Iqan, the Book of Certitude, which speaks of the twofold station of each of the manifestations, the prophets of God. And I'm going to quote directly from Baha'u'lláh in the Kitab-i-Iqan. He says, these manifestations of God have each a twofold station. One is the station of pure abstraction and essential unity. In this respect, if thou callest them all by one name, and dost ascribe to them the same attribute, thou hast not erred from the truth. Even as he hath revealed, no distinction do we make between any of his messengers. That's a quote from the Qur'an. For they one and all summon the people of the earth to acknowledge the unity of God and herald unto him the Qathar of an infinite grace and bounty. They are all invested with the robe of prophethood and honored with the mantle of glory. Thus hath Muhammad, the point of the Quran, revealed, I am all the prophets. Likewise, he saith, I am the first Adam, Noah, Moses, and Jesus. Similar statements have been made by Ali. Sayings such as this, which indicate the essential unity of those exponents of oneness, have also emanated from the channels of God's immortal utterance and the treasuries of the gems of divine knowledge, and have been recorded in the scriptures. These countenances are the recipients of the divine command and the day springs of his revelation. This revelation is exalted above the veils of plurality and the exigencies of number. Thus, he saith, our cause is but one. Inasmuch as the cause is one and the same, the exponents thereof must needs be one and the same. Likewise, the Imams of the Muhammadan faith, those lamps of certitude, have said, Muhammad is our first, Muhammad our last, Muhammad our all. It is clear and evident to thee that all the prophets are the temples of the cause of God who have appeared clothed in diverse attire. If thou wilt observe with discriminating eyes, thou wilt behold them all abiding in the same tabernacle, soaring in the same heaven, seated upon the same throne, uttering the same speech, and proclaiming the same faith. Such is the unity of those essences of being, those luminaries of infinite and immeasurable splendor. Now, I'm going to take a little cut, and I'm going to go to the next theme, because he says, remember, he says there are two stations. One station is the station of unity. The other one is the station of difference, of divergence. And Baha'u'lláh goes in very great detail about the meaning of the unity of the manifestations of God. It's one of the most important teachings of the faith, because this teaching explains to people that if we are going to have an understanding of how religion has always worked, we must recognize that every single one of the manifestations of God are one, that they all have the same authority and they speak with the same voice. So this being very important teaching, but also there's another important teaching, which is that each of the manifestations has their own message. They have their own message for a particular time, for a particular season. And this is gone into by Baha'u'lláh in great detail, also in the Kitab-i-Iqan. In the Kitab-i-Iqan, he explains that each of the manifestations actually comes with a new law, and that new law takes precedence over all the laws that have been revealed by previous manifestations. And he also comes with a new book, and that new book has the authority for the dispensation which he will guide, whatever the length of that dispensation, be it a few hundred years, be it 1,000 years or more. So these are the two stations of the manifestation. Why do I bring that up? Because the two parts of the law of God are tied directly to the two stations of the manifestation. The two parts of the law of God, I'm going to give you just the summary first, and this is derived from a compilation that you will find at Baha'u'lláhLibrary.com. I believe it's also up on the website now. And so if you want to consult it there, actually, why don't we have Jeremiah tell you where to find it on the website, if you'd like to follow along with this and look at the actual text. Jeremiah, could you point it out to us?
Yeah, the documents, I've put it in the chat window for everyone on Zoom, but I've also I've updated the website, and so you'll be able to find it underneath this video posted in the description.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. So as you heard from the original statement that John was actually quoting me, my intention was eventually to have a compilation that would cite from all of the scriptures that are important to people throughout the world. And that is still my hope. But so far, the compilation that is currently available is quoting from the Baha'i writings, stating the principle and giving various descriptions of what that principle means, of why there are two different kinds of teachings, why there are essential teachings, and then there are secondary teachings, why there are teachings that are manifesting the unity of the prophets, and there are teachings that are manifesting the singularity of each manifestation. Eventually, I hope to fill in the gaps, and maybe there will be other people who will be helpful in that regard. I hope so. So I'm going to read just the summary that I wrote for the compilation of the Baha'i references. The eternal religion of God is made up of two parts, the one being the fundamental, the spiritual, the essential teachings and ordinances, the other being the secondary, the material and accidental instructions and laws. This dual character of the divine word was explained by Abdu'l-Bahá on a number of occasions, and it's recorded. And then I give a list of some of the documents that wherein he explained this. This truth was also affirmed by Shoghi Effendi in a number of his letters, including in, and then I give a reference there. There are many references to these two principles in the Baha'i writings that are not in this compilation. An exhaustive record is probably beyond the capacity of any one writer. You'd have to explore Baha'u'llah's writings, the Bab's writings, in great detail, and also those of Shoghi Effendi and of Abdu'l-Bahá. The main point is to come in and encounter this idea and to have it firmly understood in our minds, so that we can recognize the essential teachings when we encounter them in the Baha'i writings and the writings of other faiths, and so that we come to understand why it is that certain teachings are repeated over and over again, and why others are particular to the age in which we live. So I'm going to quote something directly from Some Answered Questions, because the quotation from Some Answered Questions has the greatest level of accuracy of all the quotations. When I originally did this research, I was not as well informed about the different levels of accuracy of tablets and of talks as I later became. And so a lot of my references were from talks and promulgation of universal peace and even pilgrim notes. And they're great, and they're important sources. And in most of the cases, they're actually very accurate. But of all of those that I cited in this compilation, the most important really are the ones that are found in Some Answered Questions. Because as you may know, the questions that Abdu'l-Bahá was asked, the answers that he gave in Some Answered Questions were reviewed in Persian by him and corrected. And so we know that every single word that he said on those occasions were exactly what he meant, and there's no deviation whatsoever. This is in effect like a tablet. It has the same standing as one of his written documents. So without further ado, I'm going to cite the statement that Abdu'l-Bahá makes in Some Answered Questions. The law of God is divided into two parts. One is the fundamental basis, which comprises all spiritual things. That is to say, it refers to the spiritual virtues and divine qualities. This does not change nor alter. It is the Holy of Holies, which is the essence of the law of Adam, Noah, Abraham, Moses, Christ, Muhammad, the Bab, and Baha'u'lláh, and which lasts and is established in all the prophetic cycles. The second part of the religion of God, which refers to the material world, and which comprises fasting, prayer, forms of worship, marriage and divorce, the abolition of slavery, legal processes, transactions, indemnities for murder, violence, theft, and injuries. This part of the law of God, which refers to material things, is modified and altered in each prophetic cycle in accordance with the necessities of the times. This very same theme in different language is repeated over and over by Abdu'l-Bahá in his talks when he came to North America. And it's very interesting that he should have chosen this theme to repeat on so many occasions, and yet for some reason it didn't make it into the top 12 that thereafter became the most popular among the Baha'is and the best known. Clearly, from the standpoint that we now can when we can look back at the importance of the teachings that he shared, this must be one of the most important, because this is really the foundation upon which Baha'is can bring about the unity of religion in the world. It's not by forcing a new religion on everybody. It's by acknowledging that all the manifestations are one, that the essential teachings are one. This is a brand new idea. This is not found in any other religious tradition, except it is alluded to, but mostly it's understood by those who have come to this understanding for themselves, either by reading the Baha'i writings or by deep and mystical contemplation on the references that they read in the scriptures that seem to be similar or even identical to each other. I'm going to read a few more passages because I think that the wording in some of his talks is very, attractive. And sometimes it resonates with us in a way that the written word doesn't. And so I think it's very important for us to read those talks of Abdu'l-Bahá, because of the fact that they are really addressed to the individuals who are in the room. They have this immediate sort of emotional impact. So here's one of the talks. He says, inasmuch as the essential realities of the religions is one, and their seeming variance and plurality is adherence to forms and imitations that have arisen, it is evident that these causes of difference and divergence must be abandoned in order that the underlying reality may unite mankind in its enlightenment and upbuilding. All who hold fast to the one reality will be in agreement and unity. Then shall the religions summon people to the oneness of the world of humanity and to universal justice. Then will they proclaim equality of rights and exhort men to virtue and to faith in the loving mercy of God. The underlying foundation of the religions is one. There is no intrinsic difference between them. Therefore, if the essential and fundamental ordinances of the religions be observed, peace and unity will dawn, and all the differences of sects and denominations will disappear. Here's another statement. The religions of God have the same foundation. The dogmas appearing later have differed. Each of the divine religions has two aspects. The first is essential. It concerns morality and the development of the virtues of the human world. This aspect is common to all. It is fundamental. It is one. There is no difference, no variation in it. As regards the inculcation of morality and the development of human virtues, there is no difference whatsoever between the teachings of Zoroaster, Jesus, and Baha'u'lláh. This they agree. They are one. The second aspect of the divine religions is non-essential. It concerns human needs and undergoes change in every cycle according to the exigency of the time. Therefore, the non-essentials which deal with details of community are changed according to the exigency of the time and conditions, but the essential foundations of the teachings of Moses, Zoroaster, Jesus, Baha'u'lláh is identical, is one. There is no difference whatsoever. Man must leave imitation and seek reality. The contemporaneous religious beliefs differ because of their allegiance to dogma. It is necessary, therefore, to abandon imitations and seek their fundamental reality. Now, you may have noticed that in both of these excerpts from talks that he gave, Abdu'l-Bahá is actually talking about a third element. There's the first element, which is the unity of the essential teachings. The second element is that he's talking about in these two talks is something else. It's something that arises in every religion over time, which is that religions develop accretions They develop non-essentials that are added on by human beings. And this is what he's pointing to in both of these talks as being an obstacle for religious unity and for mutual understanding. Now, this is actually going to be addressed in another compilation. In fact, the last compilation of the 4 that were published together on Baha'i Library. And God willing, someday we will have an opportunity to look at that document together. But in the meantime, if you want to look for it yourselves, you can find all 4 of these compilations in the Baha'i Library. So here here Abdu'l-Bahá is talking about the distinction between those teachings that are developed by human beings and the essential teachings of the manifestation of God. The essential teachings are the same and they unite all. The ones that have been invented by people separate and make differences the core of the identity of the person who has a religion. What makes them feel special is what they do not have in common with others, rather than what they do have in common. But what Baha'u'lláh has taught is that there are secondary teachings which are legitimate. They are necessary because in every age we have specific needs that have to be addressed. And this is, again, a major theme of the Kitab-i-Iqan when he talks about the station of variation between the manifestations. He talks in great detail about how the laws of one manifestation are changed by the new one, and that this is a necessary part of our development as human beings. He also says that this is a major test, a major difficulty, because people become so attached to these secondary teachings that they believe that they have the same eternal authority as the essential teachings. And the essential teachings are what actually bring us together with all of humanity, regardless of what faith they espouse. The special teachings are for a particular age. And because all of the ages, except for the age of Baha'u'lláh, are in the past, they are not only cause of division between people, but they're division over things that are no longer important. They are no longer important differences, because the differences that the distinctive teachings that are suited to this age are those of the most recent manifestation. This comes to the whole teaching, of course, of progressive revelation. The teaching of progressive revelation is really one of the most fundamental Baha'i teachings. It is also one of the most fundamental teachings of every religion. It's the hidden secret. They don't realize that they all believe in progressive revelation. But you study any religion, there were religions before them, and they base their foundation, their fundamental beliefs, on that prior revelation. And then they build on that. There are so many examples of this in Judaism, in Christianity, in Islam, and in also the Eastern religions that we don't have time to talk about them. But if you study each one of these faiths, you will see that there are fundamental teachings that are in common, and then there are ones that are distinctive. And the distinct ones only have a relevancy for a particular period of time. And that particular time, as I said, it ends. It doesn't just begin, it ends. And it ends when the new manifestation comes and reveals the teachings that are best suited to that day and age. So I don't want to do too much reiteration here. I wanted to bring this principle forward to speak about it, and then to invite your questions, invite your comments, and invite your experiences. Because I think that those of us who have lived with some sort of a consciousness of religion have become aware through our own lives of the difference between those teachings which are fundamental to the cause of God and those teachings which are secondary. And our experience of that is very important to us because it determines our behavior. Ultimately, whatever we read in books is going to help us to grow, but we are going to act based upon our understanding. And if our understanding is that the essential teachings of religion are those which differentiate us from other people, we're acting upon an untruth. We're acting upon something that simply has no basis in reality. The reality is what we have in common with other people is the most important. Baha'u'lláh stresses this in very strong language in the Epistle to the Son of the Wolf, which was the last major writing that flowed from his divine mind. And it came in 1891, shortly before his passing. In that extraordinary epistle, he says that throughout his prophetic career, he spoke of one thing as being the most important. And this was whatever would bring about the unity of all human beings, and to treat the followers of every religion with fellowship, with unity, with love. He said this was the most important of all things. He said sometimes we have spoken in the language of the mystic and sometimes in the language of the lawgiver, but our intention has always been to emphasize that this station, this is the greatest, the highest station for a human being, is to recognize our unity with each other. And that this unity is going to light all of humanity alive. This is going to bring about the unity of the rest of the world, which is so riven by differences, which is so convinced that its differences are the most important thing, not what it has in common. So now I want to open this up to your thoughts and your questions. And so please go ahead and you can either indicate your interest to Jeremiah, or you can just jump right in.
We do have a hand raised. Regina, if you could ask your question, we'd appreciate it.
Yes, I know what you're saying is true. And it took me a while to understand that. I have a friend who taught my friend who's a Christian the Baha'i faith, but he began with Jesus. And he established the concept of the unity of religions. She has become a Baha'i. So I just want you to know that I've seen evidence of it. And she's my best friend. I never thought it would happen. But you meet people where they are and give validity to where they are. So thank you.
Absolutely. This is such an important thing. If we want to teach a Buddhist, we start with Buddha. We don't start with Baha'u'lláh. We start with Buddha, because this is a common ground. Then we're speaking the same language, you know? And then Abdu'l-Bahá was a master at this. When somebody would talk to him, you know, they could be speaking from a position, well, every word that comes out of their mouth may be wrong, you know, might be misguided. But he would always find something positive to say about it, because the whole point was to attract that soul. We are attracted by people who love us who accept us as we are. And there's a wonderful story in the Dawnbreakers about how Baha'u'lláh was seated upon his horse and he was traveling someplace. And there was a dervish who was a particular kind of a mystic, sort of like a guru, you know, if we imagine it. And he had wild hair and he wasn't wearing much in the way of clothes. And he was having a conversation with apparently the dirt about how, you know, the dirt was God and he was God. And he was having this conversation. And then Baha'u'lláh appears and he was struck by the bearing of the soul. He was struck by something he couldn't put into words. And then they had a very brief exchange. And according to the author of the Dawnbreakers, this dervish became a follower of Baha'u'lláh based on that one experience, based on that experience. Well, why? Because Baha'u'lláh was gentle and kind and loving to him. And he was authentically positive. You see, there's all kinds of fake positive in the world. You know, we're surrounded by people who are trying to sell something. And when they're trying to sell something, they sound like they're really positive, right? But really, their objective is they're trying to get something over on you. And this makes a lot of us extremely distrusting. But nevertheless, even if we have a very strong sense of caution with other people, you can feel when someone's being authentic. And Baha'u'lláh said this over and over again. It's by our deeds, not our words, that we demonstrate our faith. You could talk yourself blue in the face, but if you're not acting like it, to use some expressions that are popular with my generation, if you don't have the vibe, right, you know, then it's not real. And that's been, I mean, my mother also was a Christian. And when she found that the enormous respect and love that Baha'is had for Jesus, that was a door that opened for her. And then when she found out that Baha'u'lláh was the return of Jesus, because all the prophets are connected, they're all one, then that was it. That was it. Then she knew that she had discovered the truth. And there are so many pathways. Every single person's got a separate pathway to the truth. Each one of us live our lives and we find the truth, and we find it every day and something new. And when we're loving and kind and generous to each other, rather than setting up obstacles and saying, well, you're different from me because you're different, you're not as good. You can't be as good. Because you know, we're basing our identity on how we're different. That's a big, big mistake. We need to be basing our identity on what we share with other people, what we have in common. Our empathy, it's got to be real empathy. You've got to actually feel this connection with other people. And as we know, you know, Baha'u'lláh says this in the Kitab-i-Aqdas, in his book of laws. He says, there's a law, and he says you must read and study and recite the word of God every morning and every evening. And then he says, this is the faith, the eternal faith of God, eternal in the past and eternal in the future. That's one of the essential teachings of all religion. As we begin our day and we end our day, remembering God, remembering reality, remembering the most important, remembering why we're here. And then during the day, of course, you're going to make an effort to keep that consciousness alive. But if you don't start the day that way, how do you have a chance of actually doing that for the whole day long? And if you don't start your night, you're sleeping with that same realization, then how are you going to dream the right kind of dreams? How are you going to get the kind of restful sleep and how do you know that you're going to actually be in with the angels when you sleep rather than with the lower nature? Next person, who wants to raise a hand? Jump in. Eileen.
We have Eileen. Eileen.
Yes. Hello. This question is a bit off topic. But the question simply is it accurate to say that the Bab gave Baha'u'lláh his name, Baha'u'lláh? Is that documented anywhere?
Well, this is actually, there's an ongoing discussion on a list about this, and the historians are trying to figure it out. Okay.
No wonder I couldn't figure it out.
Right. That's why you can't figure it out. I think actually, if you just let me pause for 1 second, because my family has just arrived and I need to give them the credit card and tell them to go have breakfast. Okay.
Sure.
So give me 1 second here. Meanwhile, I'll introduce you to my babies. Here's
Okay.
my youngest.
Oh my gracious.
This
Hello
is
there.
Ava. And
All right.
here's my eldest. This is Naomi.
Hello.
Don't hide yourself.
This is funny.
And,
We're going to.
and all right, wait. And here's their mother. Come here, mother. Come here. This is Lily. This is my wife. This is their mother.
Hi, Lily.
Mom, Daddy, we're going into pool room.
Yes, but I
Yes, all right.
No, not right now.
Why
I'm
don't
gonna
you
go
go
back into
have
the room.
breakfast, my dears?
Yes.
Well,
Have-
so
Huh?
as we're in the process of
Have to have breakfast first.
getting
Breakfast.
different
Go have
questions, Eileen,
We'll have breakfast together.
you also have other questions to ask
Go have breakfast.
as well?
No, that
Go
was
ahead.
it.
So let me address that question, okay? So here's the very interesting thing. We don't know more than a tiny fraction of the interaction there was between the Bab and Baha'u'lláh.
Yes.
It's only a tiny fraction that is actually written down. Well, why do you suppose that is? Why would they be talking? They're two manifestations of God. Why would they be talking with us about what they're talking about?
Exactly.
Think about it.
That would be a bit beyond us.
I mean, when you're having a conversation, when you talk about all sorts of things with your husband or wife, that you don't talk about with somebody else, because
Yes.
your most intimate relationship is that you have with your spouse. Your human relationship. Well, here are two manifestations of God. We have no idea what they talked about. We don't even know if they talked. Maybe they just shared thoughts.
Mhm.
Right? There are so many mysteries when it comes to the manifestations of God, because they really are between two worlds. They are true intermediaries. They're fully human, and they're also as divine as we can conceive of.
Mhm.
And so I think really what we should understand is that the name Baha'u'lláh didn't come from the Bab, and it didn't come from Baha'u'lláh. It came from God. And it's been there, and it's been there, and it's been there for a long time.
Mhm.
There are all kinds of citations that say that there were Muslims who understood this name Baha'u'lláh was really special,
Mhm.
and we also know that there were Jews and there were Christians who understood the glory of God means something really special.
Mhm.
We don't know what it is, right? We don't know, because we're just human beings, but we know it's really important. There was even a Jewish philosopher named Saadia HaGaon, who translated all of the Bible, the entire Old Testament, into Arabic, because the language of the Jews in the Middle East at that time was Arabic. and he wanted them to be able to read it because not very many Jews were reading Hebrew at that point. So he translated to Arabic, and when he translated the passages in Isaiah that talked about the glory of God, what do you suppose he translated the glory of God in Arabic?
Bahá'u'lláh.
Yeah, exactly. He translated as Baha'u'lláh, right? And then not only that, but he wrote this extraordinary philosophical treatise. And in this treatise, he says there's an intermediary between God, the unknowable, and humanity. And that intermediary is what he's called Kavod Adonai. And his translation into Arabic of Kavod Adonai is Baha'u'lláh. You see, so there was this consciousness. This consciousness has been around because it's the truth.
Yes.
And it's always been the truth.
Yes.
You know,
well, my area of research has been the Hebrew prophets, and every last one of them talked about the day of God, the day of the Lord, and the glory of God. Every last one of them. Now that's going back 2,500 years. And yes, it's always been there. It's all, and of course, those prophets got their inspiration from the divine. What you said has been tremendously helpful to help me put this into.
Eileen, whatever's been true has been true. It's always been true.
Yes.
The manifestations of God are, their souls exist before this world. They are pre-existent, eternally pre-existent. Baha'u'lláh has been around forever. So the fact that people have found the name Baha'u'lláh is not all that surprising.
Yes. Do you have, would you be willing to share an email address?
Oh, yes.
To everyone that we can talk about other things later?
Sure. Anybody who would like to email me with anything, really anything at all.
Oh, thank you, because I do have a long list of things, but I can't preempt,
So my email address is a combination of my first and last name.
Okay,
with
John,
no repetition.
Okay.
So you could call it Petery, or you could call it P. Terry. But in any case, it's spelled P-E-T-E-R-R-Y. 19, of course.
Yes.
What other number would I use? 19, right? Right. 19 at gmail.com.
Wonderful.
And by the way, if you see some flickering weird audio video in front of you, it's actually happening. You're not hallucinating. There's some kind of a strange kind of thing that's happening with our video in this location. And so sometimes I'm going to look like I'm some kind of a psychedelic, montage, and we need to have some rock and roll music here. But actually it's just some kind of weird thing happening with the video. There, see, it went away. So who else would like to make a comment or raise a question?
Peter, have you ever studied, do you know who Jamshed Pasdar is? You ever heard of him? He's 96 years old. Jamshed Pasdar. He's 96 years old, and he wrote 2 books, The God of Buddha and Buddha Made Midabs Appeared. And
Yes, he's a Persian Baha'i who pioneered to Asia very young, and who
actually, we talk about Adam and Eve, but Jamshed is actually founded the Persian New Year. He's the one that saved the world from a glacier age. It's kind of like Noah, but he's actually I think he's in Malaysia today. He's 96 years old. There are 2 books, Buddha Maitre Midabs Appeared and The God of Buddha. He gave these books to the Dalai Lama in 1979. Now, I could ask you a lot of questions, Do you know anything about what the word Dhammachakraparvatana means?
Well, I'm not as, I studied Buddhism. I studied Buddhism when I was a younger man in quite some depth. And I have not actually returned to my study of Buddhism except sort of from time to time. But so I haven't done that for a while. So my memory is not as clear on Buddhism as it is, for example, on Judaism, Christianity, or Islam. But I do recall that I found this unity of truth in Buddhism. And one of the reasons why I knew I found it is because I went through a period when I thought I was going to become a Buddhist monk. And I was going to join the Tassajara monastery in California. And then through a series of things, I came to realize that there was a more inclusive truth than the truth that was being taught by Zen Buddhists. And that didn't mean that there was a better truth. It was just more inclusive. And I was looking for inclusivity. And so when I discovered Baha'u'lláh, I said, that's it. That's it. Because he's correlating everything. He's bringing everything together.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm about 19, because I don't know if you ever got in the Surangama Sutra. It depends on which translation there is. Because Ananda and Buddha were taught together, but Buddha talked about, and I do have one, it's a Buddhist Bible here, and it's published by Beacon Press, but it talks about the 19th experimentation. You know, in the Qur'an, 74:30 talks about the 19 keepers of fire, and I do have copies of the Persian Bayan. When the Bible talks about 19, it refers it back to 74:30. So, you know, 19 is our number of unity, right?
Yes.
You know, I do have, there are black roses that are there in Africa. You know, Abdu'l-Bahá talked about the black rose, a little boy. You know, the 2 Baha'is in Africa that have the name Rose. But I could ask you a major question.
Well, here's one of the things that's very interesting. Whatever field you want to investigate, whatever field, you want to investigate computer science, you want to physics, you want to investigate religion, you want to mysticism, esoteric, every esoteric field you can imagine, alchemy, whatever interests you, you can find a connection to Baha'u'lláh.
Oh, yeah.
Because Baha'u'lláh speaks to all of these kinds of knowledge, all of these kinds of awareness, because if you rule out something and say, oh, no, that's not true. If you rule out anything categorically, you cut yourself off from people. And that means those people never have a chance to benefit from you as a teacher. And that's what Baha'is are supposed to be. Every single one of us is supposed to be a teacher. We have no business doing anything else. That's the only way we can help God. God doesn't need anything else from us. Nothing. He doesn't need, we have all kinds of smart ideas, right? We think, well, you know, God should take me up on this offer. I'm going to tell him a great idea and he should adopt that. No, he already came up with the best ideas. You know, what we need to do is teach. And teaching is not going and knocking on doors and alienating people because they don't want you knocking on their door. It is attracting people. And sometimes, you know, Abdu'l-Bahá says that one person can be the cause of the illumination of an entire country. And we have only to look at the example of history and study Buddhist history, and study Hindu history, and study Christian history. And who do you find out? You ever heard of St. Patrick? Well, St. Patrick went over to a little place called Ireland, where people believed in elves and leprechauns and who knows what else. And that man was so saintly. He was so genuinely Christian that he lit a fire. And that fire has resulted in millions and millions of souls being attracted to Jesus and being attracted to God. And those millions of souls are waiting to hear what we have to teach them. And my parents took this trip. They only took 2 vacations in their entire marriage. One was to Greece, one was to Ireland. And their experience in Ireland was the people were so sweet and so receptive and so genuinely friendly. But you know what? I've been all over the world. I haven't found any people who aren't exactly the same way. I found them in India. I found them in Madagascar. That beautiful woman that you saw in my screen is my wife. She's from Madagascar. You know what? Before I found her in Madagascar, I didn't even know that Madagascar existed. I thought Madagascar was some kind of place that Disney invented. I'm not kidding. I really thought that. I thought, well, oh, that's where, lemurs, they're little like monkeys and they're singing and dancing. I thought, well, that can't be real. Well, it isn't real, but I've seen real lemurs. They're pretty interesting without having to be turned into Disney characters. My point is that wherever you go, you have this experience. There's a wonderful story about how Ali Nakjavani and Hand of the Cause Banani addressed a public meeting in Uganda, right? And after everybody left, one man stayed. One man. And that man was an alcoholic. And he was a womanizer. And that man became a hand of the cause of God. And the cause of the conversion of who knows how many people in Africa. He was a one-man entry by troops because of who he became, because of Baha'u'lláh. He was transformed. You know how Christians sometimes talk about born again? Well, guess who talks about born again? Baha'u'lláh talks about born again. And Abdu'l-Bahá talks about born again. Because being born again is real. If you are transformed by the Spirit, you are one power. And it's like you are a whole minion. You're a whole army. You have, those prayers of Abdu'l-Bahá, where he says, transform me from a gnat into an eagle. Yeah, that's something only God can do. And when God does it, then we have tremendous influence, but it's not our influence, it's his influence for acting through us. And that's, again, here's another teaching. This is one of the essential truths of the religion of God, is that we have to turn to God. When we turn to God and we be filled with his Spirit, then we become transformed. Then we became angels. Then our influence to transform the lives of other people becomes beyond anything human. And that's an essential teaching. That's in every religion. And we all know that there are people in every religion who have exemplified this quality. I met Mother Teresa in Calcutta. What an experience. I only spent maybe 10 minutes with her. I didn't need any more. I knew from just being with her This is a soul that's on fire. You know, she's dedicated herself entirely to doing God's work. And those souls, and you know who were her supporters? This was a big surprise. Her supporters in Calcutta were a group of very wealthy Hindu women. She wasn't getting any help from the Catholic Church. She didn't have big sponsors in, you know, Italy or Spain or United States. She was being bankrolled by Hindus. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that wonderful? And, you know, and here she is. She's not only a Roman Catholic, she's a nun, right? She started her own order of nuns. But she understood. She understood. God's ways are not our ways. We have to get out of the way and do things his way. Who else wants to cut me off? Who else would like to say something? Kathleen, you're here.
Yes, hello.
Wonderful to
I
see
took
you.
your Bayan class. It was wonderful. I have a question.
Yes.
I've been that came up at the very beginning of your talk and comes up for me periodically. I've been in Baha'i a long time, but have you ever felt like there was some simple little thing that you ought to understand, but every time you run into it, it's like you stubbed your toe on a rock and fell on your nose? And here's what happens to me. Every time I hear pure abstraction and essential unity. So what I would like to do is tell you where my current understanding is derived from thinking and so forth. And then you can amplify it perhaps. That the manifestation of God has the capacity to purely receive and then convey the will and teachings of God. So in other words, he's able to purely abstract the revelation from God. Okay, am I at least 1/4 of the way there?
I think it's even more than that, because not only does he receive and send, but he exemplifies. He exemplifies in his every act, in his every word. He is God on earth. He exemplifies God without being the incarnation of God. We don't believe in that. No religion actually teaches that God is walking around. You know, that's a teaching that has been developed by various, you know, clergy. You know, it's a very powerful one, because if your God actually came here to earth and is walking around telling people what to do, then somehow he's like the top of the pecking order. That means he's a higher God than anybody else, right? You know, but no, Baha'u'lláh, he says every single manifestation, if he was to say, I am God, speaks the truth, because everything he does and says is from God. So in that sense, you know, the Guardian is translating specific words from Arabic and Persian, because even though the Persian Bayan is written in Persian, it's written in a combination of Arabic and Persian, because when you want to write about divine things in the Persian language in the 19th century, you use a lot of Arabic. You use a lot of Arabic, and I mean, why wouldn't you? The Quran is in pure Arabic, right? All the earliest thinkers or writers in Islam were speaking and writing in Arabic. So there's a continuity. And even Baha'u'lláh says, he says, as great as the station of Persian is, and how everybody should learn Persian, he says his preferred language to become the language of the world, of humanity, is Arabic. Arabic has that very special distinction. So I'm going back to, what does that mean? The specific thing of the abstraction, right? Of essential unity. At the same time as we can go and study those words very carefully, you go find out what the original is and then try to contemplate on it. We also just need to understand that he explained the meaning of those words in the long passages of the Kitab-i-Gan, where he's explaining the station of unity. The station of unity, he talks about it in part 1. He talks about it in part 2, mostly in part 2. Go find those passages. I read part of them, but they go on. And they go on for a good reason. Something that Baha'u'lláh is going to say in paragraph 1 is going to resonate with this guy over here. Something he says in paragraph 2 is going to connect with somebody over there. We need to hear it in all these different ways for the people to go, aha, that's what he means. He can't just say it once. He can't say it just in one formulation. That's why dogma doesn't work. That's why dogma will never work, because you try to find one way of saying something and that will not touch the heart of every person. It will only get some of them. And so they'll just repeat it, hoping that, eventually they'll understand. But Baha'u'lláh is speaking to everybody. And he has to speak in this comprehensive language that touches all the bases. And that's why, this is something you find also with Bob. He seems like he's repeating himself. No, he never repeats himself. There's always a variation, because he knows that we have to hear something 20 or 40 times in different words in order to understand, oh, that's what he's talking about. And it's not just a particular moment. This is the wisdom of us studying the Word of God every morning and every evening, is that one morning you get it one way, another time you get it another way. He's speaking to us at different times of day, different times in our lives, different times in our experience of life. And you think about it, when you hear a message as a mother, it's different from before you had children. If you hear a message when you're a grandmother, it's different from when you just had children. We grow over time. And we don't just grow in a linear way. We grow in this magical sort of way with sometimes great leaps forward and sometimes great leaps backwards and sometimes great leaps up and down. That's human life, is this vibrancy, this organic characteristic. And his revelation speaks to us so powerfully because it's attuned to our diversity inside of ourselves and as well as amongst ourselves. So that's what I would say about that, is you could study the words and then let go and go on and read it, because he's going to describe to you, he's going to tell you. And sometimes you won't be reading that passage where he's explaining things. You'll be reading a hidden word, you'll be reading a prayer, you'll be in a moment of meditation and you won't be reading anything, and it comes to you. And you say, oh, now I really understand what he meant by that. And, for me, the confirmation of the essential unity of all the manifestations has happened over and over by experiencing fellowship with people of other religions. That's a commandment. He gave that commandment over and over to the Baha'is. Go. This is not like interfaith dialogue where you just sit across the table and have coffee and cookies. I'm talking about fellowship. You invite people to your house. They invite you to their house. You get to know them. You become friends. When you do fellowship and you find that somebody who's a devout Hindu and you as a Baha'i have more in common than you ever imagined, that's a moment. That's a moment of where you really learned what Baha'u'lláh is talking about, because it's got to be lived. It's got to be experienced. It can't just be in the realm of abstraction, right? Of pure abstraction. It's got to be in our lives, in our living experience. And then again, you know, like I remember that story I told about Dawnbreakers, where Baha'u'lláh is walking, he's going down and he's riding his horse, and then he encounters the dervish. Dervish is just living his life. He's living a life completely absorbed in worshiping God. And then the manifestation of God comes along and he's ready for him. He's ready for him. He's been looking all his life. And then there he is, bam, you know, and that's the most beautiful thing in the world, is when we have those moments where we're really with him. We really feel connected. And the more of those moments of connection we have, the happier we are, and the more we have to give to other people, and the better teachers we are through our lives, through our behavior. It's real. It's translating the abstraction into the concrete, and having something come and suffuse us and basically sort of take us over.
Awesome answer. Thank you, Peter.
So I'm waiting for somebody else who wants to say something, and I have to say that Baha'u'lláh tells us, he promises us in multiple passages translated by the beloved guardian, and the guardian didn't translate anything by chance. It was always deliberately to guide us. Right. And the reason why he wrote in English is because he knew that people speaking English had a very important role to play in the advancement of the cause. Not just Americans. That's kind of a little, you know, we like to go on this little ego trip collectively and think, well, we're so important. Well, guess what? A whole lot of other people speak English. And not only that, but someday, probably the whole planet is going to speak English. We need an international auxiliary language, and guess what? The one that's being adopted by the people of the world is the English language. But when I come back to the Guardian, because the Guardian, every word, he connects with the spirit of that word. And we're so fortunate to be able to read his writings and read his translations, and to thank God that he didn't get so carried away with answering the questions and taking care of the problems of us Baha'is, that he didn't have time to translate. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine? What if the Guardian had just been, you know, preoccupied with the Baha'is of his age, of his day, and he didn't take time out to do the translations? Boy, we would be so impoverished, you know, and humanity would be so impoverished, because it's when he translates from the heart. He translates from the soul. You can feel it. You know that the words are imbued with the spirit. And that's why, you know, I've been told this many, many times by people who are fluent in Persian. When I want to understand what the Kitab-i-Gan says, I read it in the Guardian's English.
Hi, I just wanted to bring up something here.
Yes.
In addition to being a musician, as you can probably tell from my background here, I am also a teacher of English as a foreign language. And what you said about English becoming universal, this is something interesting, that in 96% of all conversations on a daily basis that ever take place in the English language, one or all of the participants in that conversation is not a native English speaker.
I didn't know that. That's really fascinating, Andy. And that's really a good indicator of where we're going, isn't it?
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, another indicator is that the most successful Chinese businessman, probably of the 20th century, started out as an English teacher. Did you know that? Yeah. He's hanging out someplace secret so that he doesn't get slapped in jail. Let's hope that he gets that he'll get freedom again so he can operate his wonderful company again. But that company has brought so many products to people all over the world and not just to China. And he started out teaching English. So I don't want to I remember why I brought up the question of teaching. I brought up the question of teaching because teaching the faith is every time that we open our mouths to speak about the faith of Baha'u'lláh and allow the inspiration of the concourse on high to grab hold of us and speak through us. Every time we do that, we can be doing that in so many different ways. We don't need to think we have to have a fireside, or we have to have a little teaching booklet, or we have to have some sort of formalized situation or context. Teaching can, and we don't have to think that teaching has to be defined by evangelical Christians. Please, let's not do that. And let's also know that teaching that doesn't have to be defined by used car salesmen either, because that kind of teaching it repels at least as many people as it attracts. I'm not really sure it attracts anybody, but it's just obnoxious. Teaching is sometimes just being quiet and being connected to God and loving God and being around other people, and they just go like, what's going on with you? Why are you so nice? Right? All right, they asked. Now you can say something. So anyway, to return to our subject here, the two parts of the law of God. The two parts of the law of God is a subject that I recommend that all of you really think deeply about and deepen yourselves on, because so often we get wrapped up as Baha'is in the secondary, in the things that distinguish ourselves from other people. And we have to we have to remember that the most important are the primary, are the essential teachings. And that's what we have in common with every human being. Every human being, because every human being, even if they are an atheist, even if they're a polytheist, even they're an animist, they're created by God, and they're created by God to know and love him. They have that capacity. And we can be of spiritual assistance to others, but first we have to be spiritual assistants to ourselves. We have to get the message and live the message. And that's so much of that has to do with becoming absorbed in the spirit of the writings, the spirit of the teachings, and allowing them to change who we are.
Peter, this is very beautiful, having spent the time not just with the people who have asked questions that are very, very wide in range, but the responses you've given about this, in so many words, let deeds, not words, be your adorning in your responses. it makes a big difference, because as Baha'is, we are called to this level that people may not have understood before, where people in the past had to focus on also saving knowledge for a future generation. Now it seems we've, as a human society, gained this maturity to maintain our knowledge, and now we're at the point where we need to really act that knowledge. So the idea of this action, I would like to ask you a final question for today, as we are closing in on that hard stop time. You had mentioned about the value of a teacher and sometimes having silence as one of the manifestations of the actions of a teacher, that it still attracts people who want to learn. Now, if you could kindly elaborate of course, we have about 8 minutes left. If you could kind of elaborate on how these different teaching methods, how you've maybe seen an example of these teaching methods in effect where it attracted the hearts, despite what you would think conveyance of the knowledge itself would have originally implied. I would think, okay, I'm learning, I'm going to hear it, and I'm going to learn it. That's what people typically think from the old model, that you are inputting information simply. What does it mean to teach beyond just simply conveying in words?
The Guardian recommended, strongly recommended, repeatedly recommended that Baha'i youth begin their study as entering adulthood with the study of the Dawnbreakers. You know why? I'll give you my theory.
Elaborate.
My theory is this. By this time, let's say they're 15. They spent 15 years praying, reading the writings, deepening on them, seeing the example of their fellow Baha'is who are self-sacrificing, who are imbued with the teachings, hearing many firesides, participating in many Baha'i meetings. They're saying a lot, okay? What are you supposed to do? You're supposed to read the Dawnbreakers, because the Dawnbreakers show you the lives of people who gave it all. Who didn't give some. This is not a Friday night thing. This is not a Sunday thing. This is not a once in a while thing. They died for the faith. They gave everything. And they didn't die sad, complaining. Oh, that's not right for you to kill me. No, they died with joy. They died. You don't die with joy unless you've been changed. All right. You don't have candles lit in your body and you're chanting the verses of God and you're in ecstasy. You don't do that unless you've been changed. That's total transformation. So that's what happens. He said, you've got to read about people who have been changed by this faith. And you'll find some of them don't talk very much. They act. They give it. They give it all. And I think about all of the blue-haired ladies who travel taught and pioneered. Remember? There are wonderful stories about them, especially during the ministry of the Guardian. The Guardian would say, I need somebody in Ecuador. Bam! Some lady in East, who knows what, some little town in Iowa would say, okay, fine, I'm going. And she'd just go to Ecuador. She didn't speak Spanish. She was in a wheelchair. It didn't matter. She arose to serve. That's the kind of courage that human beings get when they do the will of God, when they respond to the call with yes, never with no. We can all say no. We're really good at saying no. Oh, no, I'm not ready for that. I'm too tired for that. I'm too old for that. I'm too broke for that. No, this is just like yes. and trusting everything I need is going to come to me and support me in doing this because this is the will of God. I know it. And so I'm just going to do it. So that's what I would say. It's like his wisdom was understanding. You're talking about all these kids in America and England and Australia, and they're brought up in their fairly, liberal society where you get to do whatever you want. And you don't really know, what are your core values. So take those kids and make them study the Dawn Breakers and find out what real dedication is from the example of people who have lived it to the maximum. And by the way, another thing you learn when you study the Dawn Breakers is how to pronounce all those really difficult Arabic and Persian names. And they're a real challenge for a whole lot of people in the world. But if you can do that, you've accomplished something. You have. You've taken on a test, a difficulty, and you said, I'm not going to give up. I'm going to figure out how to say this thing and how to understand who is who. Because if you don't understand who is who in the story, then it doesn't really mean anything ultimately. So that's one of the things. Another thing is that the Guardian's English is, how to put it, it's magnificent. It is such high English. It's really the sublimity of his prose that grabs people. But you say it can't grab you when you're a teenager, because when you start out as a teenager, you're used to reading Hemingway at the very best, or just comic books, You're used to the dumbed down, because the dumbed down's been going on for a long time. Let's face it, it's not just our generation. It's been going on for a long time. And so you go and you read the Dawn Breakers, and that lifts you up because the language is so sublime. It's so beautiful, and it's so incomprehensible unless you work at it. You've got to look up words. You've got to ask people questions. You've got to work at it. And human beings don't grow unless they work. That's the truth. We don't ever grow unless we work. The more we work, the more we grow. And I'm not making this up. Go read the Gleanings. Baha'u'lláh says, everything that you do is according to how much you put in. It is according to your efforts. And that's why he says how important deeds are. Because we can all talk and talk and talk and talk. But it's how much we do, how much effort we're willing to put in. I have seen so many miracles in my life. One of the miracles I saw is a friend of mine who was a graduate student in theoretical physics at Princeton University. And he got interested in Arabic. And by the time he finished his PhD, which he finished early, he had so mastered the Arabic language, and not modern Arabic. I'm talking about medieval Arabic. He could read manuscripts written by Ibn Sina, Ibn Rushd. He could read the earliest commentaries on the Qur'an. He could read the Qur'an with perfect understanding. He was so good that the House of Justice asked him to come and serve in the research department. Did he have a PhD in Arabic? No. Did he have a PhD in Islamic studies? No. He didn't have any advanced degree. He didn't even have a bachelor's degree. He just knew. He knew it. And he knew it because he obviously got divine assistance. It came to him. And that's one of the smaller miracles, is to see somebody completely transform, because he opened up to it. He embraced it. And I remember watching him and a friend of his do battle back and forth, because they wanted to see who could remember the Gleanings the best. These guys were awesome. They reminded me of Bobbies. Remember how the Bobbies used to beat up on each other in Baghdad when they would check each other out to they were always like two Bobbies. They'd check on each other and see how they were doing. This kind of mutual encouragement, but also there's a competitive edge to it. Is you want to do your best because this is your friend, right? You want to show your friend, I can do my best, and you can do your best. We have to do that with all of each other. We have to encourage all of each other to do our best, because that's what we're here for.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank you.
I'm gonna have to part with you, so I'm going to give you another view of my beautiful girls.
Hello there.
Oh, the other one ran away. But this is my Ava, and she's 3.
Hello, Ava. You're going to be growing up very soon. 3 years old, will be 13 in a blink of an eye.
And then 23.
And then 33.
Hey, slow down. I really love her at this age.
Yes,
All
sir.
right.
Yes, sir.
Lots of love to all of you, and thank you so much for coming today. And I really hope you enjoy reading and studying the compilation, and that it will, bring you to a deeper understanding of this principle of the faith.
And for everyone that's curious, and just to close out, and for everyone that's curious how to access the compilation and whatnot, it's going to be on the video description. Also, if you visit clearwaterbaha'is.org. So if you're either viewing this on YouTube or on the Facebook page, or if you're here on the Zoom, we welcome you to go to clearwaterbaha'is.org and find the materials. We want to make 2 plugins here. First, we have the oceanlibrary.com website available, where you can right now go and for free view the copy of the Dawnbreakers. And it's not just that. You can read the copy of the Dawnbreakers with audio. So we have a real living person that recorded their voice, Miss Bahia Nakjavani. Miss Bahia Nakjavani recorded her voice reading the book. And you can actually listen to the book and read along, so you can have the proper pronunciation. Further, you can, as you may not recognize a certain word, you can highlight the word, and the word will be defined for you in the application. So you can also take a little snippet of a quote that stands out to you. You can paste it somewhere. It will provide the citation for you and the link to get back to it. So there is so much more to this application. There are images that you may not find when you go through the book in its way, and there's also the footnotes that have been incorporated so masterfully. We really recommend that you look at this on Ocean 2.0 Interfaith Reader, accessible on oceanlibrary.com. And lastly, for everyone, if you are looking for the content as to what was referenced in this video, we again recommend you to go to the video description or the comments of the video on YouTube, Clearwater Baha'is, on Facebook, the Baha'i Center of Clearwater. We hope you all have a beautiful, beautiful Sunday and a beginning of your search. Again, oceanlibrary.com. Check it out. Bye, everyone.